Welcome everyone to this Let's Play of Kerbal Space Program First Contract. This is episode 20 and we begin where we left off in the previous episode with a completed tech tree. We have now researched every single possible scientific discovery known to Kerbals. There's nothing else left to do, is there? Now, in all the previous episodes, we didn't manage to leave the Kerbin system. We flew shuttle missions up to low Kerbin orbit, we went around the Mun and Minmus, but to be honest, we didn't get very far. Mainly because the transfer windows to all of the outer planets were just in completely the wrong location. That said, we made shed loads of cash, mainly at the cost of Kerbidine, and of course we made shed loads of science because of our excellent strategy. Now I think it's that strategy we now need to change, because we don't need more science, we need more funds. So I will see you in the administration building. Now of course you will all remember our previous visit to the administration centre where Linus has been helping us with our outsourced R&D strategy. Here we take 20% of our earnings in funds from each of the contracts we complete and turn that into 1 science for each 34.291 funds that we would have earned. Now that's been great up until now. As you can see, we have an excess of 3,800 science, but we need funds because if we are going to get out of the Kerbin system, it's going to be expensive. So we need to pop over and see Mortimer and see how he can help. But to begin with, let's cancel the current strategy. Now Mortimer has 2 potential strategies. One is to take reputation and turn it into funds, and the other is to take science and turn it into funds. And I think this is one we definitely need to sort out. Now again, we need to decide our commitment level, and I'm going to go very bravely for 50% of all of our science will be converted into funds. So for each 1 unit of science we will get 9 funds. Now that's going to cost us a handy sum of science, but of course we have an excess of science, so there's not much problem there. So let's accept that strategy. Now you can have more than 1 strategy if you want, and I reckon we need to convert more of our science into reputation, and then that reputation will yield us better contracts, and we will then get more science, which gives us more funds, and so on. Now we have 2 possibilities. We have the first, which is to take funds and generate reputation. That's the appreciation campaign. Well, I don't think we'll be running that. But we could run the open source tech program. This will take some science and turn it into reputation. Now we could go as high as 50% of our income, but I do want some science income just in case we want to change our strategy at a later date, or something else becomes available for us to research using science. So we'll commit to 30% of our science, leaving us with 20% left. So we will accept that strategy. Now all we have to do is decide on some more contracts. So let's pop over and see Jean in the mission control. Now you'll remember from the previous episode we do actually have 2 active contracts. The first of these is to bring a newly discovered Class C asteroid into orbit around Minmus. This is going to give us some additional funds as a result of our contract. It'll give us some additional reputation at the expense of science. But hey, who needs science? Now, on that asteroid, we're going to build a new orbital station around Minmus. Again, it will yield funds and reputation at the expense of science. But what other contracts are there available? Now there's one of a particular interest. and that is to position a satellite in equatorial orbit around Kerbin. Now, it's not going to yield us much in the way of funds or reputation, and our strategy is not going to help given we have such a tiny amount of science to be gained from this particular contract. However, I thought this would be an excellent opportunity for us to build a single stage to orbit aircraft. Now, you all know how I love aircraft, so let's go over to the spaceplane hangar and build one. I'll see you there. So here we are in the spaceplane hangar for our first spaceplane build. And for that I think we're going to use the new spaceplane parts. This is the new cockpit, and I think it looks just right for this sort of new world, our new exercise in spaceplane building. Now next, I guess we're going to need where are we? Utilities. We're going to need a cargo bay, so we'll take the small cargo bay, put that on the end there. Suitable for small satellites, I think. So we'll just close that up for the moment. And then I think we will need a fuel and engine adapter. So we'll have that, I think. We'll stick that on the back there, and then have our friendly neighborhood 909 to go on the back like so. So that's going to be our basic body section. Now next we need some turbojets. Now these are the turbojet engines. They're suitable for high altitude and SSTOs, but first we're going to need something to mount them on. So let's put a couple of tanks either side, and just for a bit of stability, let's put some inline stabilizers on. We'll have a pair of those either side like so, and just for good measure, a pair either side like so. Give us a good bit of stability. Now let's go put our engines on next. So we have engines. Put those on the back like so, and this can be a little bit tricky because it really doesn't want the symmetry to match up, but I think we're going to be okay. Yep, we're going to be okay there. And just to finish these off, let's get some of these new shock cone intakes. They have a substantial amount of intake air, 0.4, which is greater than the 0.2 of the old ram air intake. So let's have a couple of those just to finish off this section. Right, okay, I think that's that body section done there. Next let's get, pick that up, get some delta wings. Now these delta wings have a good amount of lift, large delta wing lift rating 2. The smaller ones are only a quarter of that, 0.5. So that will do nicely for wings. Now tail fin, I rather like this winglet for tail fins, but we only need one of them, so let's switch symmetry off and put that in place like so. And then some elevons, something to give us some vertical pitch control. So let's just rotate these, plant them again. We want 2 of those, so let's just plant them somewhere in the middle of the wings like so. So this is more or less, obviously we've got a few bits and pieces to finish here. We've got to put wheels on and all that kind of good stuff. But I think we should have a first stab at balancing the plane. So let's get the centre of mass and the centre of lift. Now, I couldn't really have got it much better. The idea is the centre of lift, which is this blue marker, should just be just behind the centre of mass, meaning you won't have it flipping up or down as a result of a movement of mass when we use up the fuel. So example, when we remove all the fuel from here, it's still more or less centered. So that's actually pretty good. Now we'll probably have to come back to adjust that once we put the wheels on, once we put the satellite in. But actually, as a start of a 10, that is pretty good. But the next thing I think I'm going to add is the thing that really makes SSTOs work or fail. And that is air intakes. The more air you can cram into the engines, the better. So, let's start by building a single air intake. And what we're going to do is we are going to role play it a little bit. So we are going to make this sort of look roughly the way it should. Whoops. And this is one intake. So let's get symmetry on. And let's fit as many air intakes on this wing as we can. Now we want them to be level with the wing, not on top of it. So there we go. That's too far. So let's use Shift S just to, I think it's too far, yes. So just to, oh, too far. There we go. Let's just see if I can get one of them in like so. There we go. So there's one pair of intakes. Now we can fit a few more on, so let's alt click, and if we do it from the back we can see if we can, here we go, just get a little gap between the engines, the intakes, just for a smidgen of realism, just a smidgen of course. And there's another one. And I think we can cram one more on right up here at the end. Maybe not. Can we? Right up here on the end. There we go. So we've got 4 air intakes there, but I reckon we can do better. We can probably cram some intakes on here. So let's just rotate this round. Like so. There we go. Now that is a lot of intakes. Now there are people who will spam intakes even though there's absolutely no hope of them being in any way realistic, because they will work. If you just have an air intake just anywhere, it will take in air as long as it's facing forward. The fact that there might be another air intake in front of it is irrelevant. Now these aren't quite straight, are they? So let's see if we can just finish those off. And those are called air hogs. Is that better? But I am at least trying to put a reasonable amount of realism, for KSP that is, by not just spamming a line of intakes all the way around the edge, which you could do of course, and it would work. But hey. Right, next we need wheels. Let's put some wheels on this thing. Where are we? Here we go. Wheels. Let's put one at the front here, like so, and then 2 up here at the back. Now we want it to lean forward, or rather lean upwards very slightly, to give us a little bit of help taking off. A little bit of lift taking off. So let's just have a quick look. Is that going to be too far? Is it going to be nose up? I think very slightly. Well, let's name this Mini SSTO Mark 1. Save it and just pop on out to the runway and just see, well, if any bits drop off. I'll see you there. Right, well it's well, midday-ish? Well, mid-morning-ish. And we're out on the runway. Now, planes start off with their brakes off. So let's just switch the brakes on and check that all our parts appear to be firmly fixed where they need to be. Well, nothing seems to be broken. It does seem to be, well, it's almost completely flat on the runway. So maybe if we bring the nose wheel back a little, we can lift the nose up, give it a bit of a head start getting into the sky. Now let's double check we have some fuel running into the engines. Let's just activate these engines. We didn't sort out the staging, so I've activated them manually. Well, they seem to be running. They seem to be okay. Activate the rocket engine, just throttle down a little. That seems to be running. So we seem to have at least a functional plane. Now we need to add our Kerbal Engineer device. We need to add obviously our payload and some bits and pieces in the payload bay to help the plane do its things when it gets there. For example, we need some RCS thrusters just to help move the plane away from the payload, because it's just going to pop out of the payload bay. Obviously we need a way of fixing the payload to the bay, and we'll need some solar panels. So let's kill the engines and recover our vehicle. I'll see you back in the paceplane hangar. Right, well, let's get started with some of those modifications. The first thing we said was that we were going to draw this back a little to raise the nose up. So let's bring it back to middle. Bring it back to here. That should raise the nose up, so that's that done. We were going to put Kerbal Engineer on, so we can check how things are going in flight. So let's just place that there like so, opposite the hatch. Now we also need some, let's have a look, photovoltaic cells. Let's get 2 of those so we can get some charge. And of course we couldn't do without our can't do without panels, so we'll have a couple of those there just in case we need the additional charge. Now, what else did we say we needed? Payload bay. Let's have a look at the payload bay. Now, in here we're going to put our craft, but we need something to attach it to. So we should have, it's going to be small, so we'll have the Clampetron Junior docking port. We only need the one, and using the new super duper Alt key we can clip that into place on the node. Now what else? Well, we can probably, just for a bit of role play, add some of these hex cans. Let's have a look. We want a life support small hex can. Let's see if we can fit that in this corner here. Now I know it's clipping through, but we can argue that that's going through into the cabin, so that's fine. And then a small waste can on this side. See if we can fit that in there. In you go, come on. Doesn't want to go in. There we go. So there we have. There's our 2 life support cans. That's good. Now on the back here we don't have any batteries anywhere on this craft, so utility. Let's put a couple of small batteries here on the back. Can we fit them in? Similar place to have 2 of them. Fit them into these corners there. There we go. So that'll give us some battery storage, just a little bit of charge, because we don't have any batteries elsewhere. And I think that pretty much does it, although I guess we could do with a nose light. Don't really need much in the way of lighting for this task, but what we should. So let's have a look at, oh there they were, the illuminators. We've got this, we don't need two, again we only need the one. And let's rotate it, not that way, that way. No, it's not, doesn't seem to want to fit onto the nose. Oh, there we go, we'll fit it underneath the nose. So at least we have some light, should we need it. Oh yes, I forgot, we do need RCS thrusters. And I suggest we use the Place Anywhere RCS thrusters. And we place one here and one here. Now what we're going to use these for, have I placed that in the middle? No, I haven't. What we're going to use these for is just to move our space plane away from the payload when we've released it from the docking port. Otherwise it would just float in the bay and it would be really difficult to actually get it out. So I think we are now covered, so let's just save that and just do a little bit of a recap. We've got RCS, we've got batteries, we've got life support and waste, we've got our panels, we've got Kerbal Engineer, we've got our wheels, and we've got our light. Obviously we haven't got a payload. Now we could make the payload, actually build the payload in here, but I think we'll go over to the VAB, build the payload separately, and then use the sub-assembly system in order to drag the sub-assembly into the payload bay. We'll then just have a few bits and pieces left to do before we're ready to launch. So I will see you in the VAB. Okay, so we are in the VAB. So the first thing we need to do is build ourselves a little satellite. Now there's going to be a little quirk that will come along later, but we'll worry about that when the time comes. But first things first, we're going to build ourselves a tiny little itty bitty teeny weeny ion satellite. So we are going to need the ion fuel tank, which we can find here, and the little ion engine. So let's go and find the little ion engine. There we go, little ion engine. Put that on there, and that is essentially our satellite. Now the ion engine uses xenon gas in the fuel container and combines that with an electric field in order to generate a stream of xenon atoms that propels the little craft forward. But that does take a lot of electricity. So let us prepare a little something that will help us maintain the electric current. So we've got 4 panels. That should be fine, but we can also use some of these RTGs, radio thermo thingy doodah generators. So let's see, let's see if we can clip those to the side like so. So we should have some power generation even when it's dark. Now that will give us a fairly neat and tidy little craft. But just to roleplay it a little more, I think we should have a transmitter on the top so that, there we go, so that we can transmit whatever data this satellite should observe back to KSC. Now we can probably cram a little bit of science on here. Probably don't need the seismic accelerometer because that's not that useful in space. But what else have we got? The barometer's probably not that useful, but we'll see if we can cram on. Here we go. Let's see if we can put that on there. That's a little thermometer. That'll work in space. We've got the gravioli detector. We'll put that on opposite, like so. And to be honest, that's about it. That is about everything we need. But how are we going to attach this thing? Right, okay. Well, we can attach it here by the engine. That would seem fair enough. But how are we going to get it to the spaceplane hangar? Now, you would normally try dragging and dropping into this sub-assembly zone. But notice that we can't, because the part isn't attachable. You can't attach anything to it. So we are going to have to just reassemble this top section a little bit differently. And the way we're going to do it is like this. This is going to be our root part. So we take all these parts off, if we grab the right part. And this part here is going to represent the inside of our compartment on our little space plane. In which case we are going to need the utility parts, and we're going to need the junior clampetron in order to represent that part. So let's put this on under here. So that's going to represent the inside of our compartment. So what we can do now is we can get another one of these bodies and we can put that on there. We can reattach that, and now this bit is attachable. So let's see if we can cram our science back on. Let's see, put that in like so. See if we can squeeze that on like so, and then we can have, if I can get it, there we go, couple of transmitters. That should be fine. Now when we grab this part, when we're on the right tab, now when we grab this part and drop it in here, we can drop it in as a sub-assembly. Oops, this is going to be micro, if I can spell, microsat 1. Try again. Microsat 1. Save. Right, so we now have a draggable part that we can attach to stuff. So if we pop back to the spaceplane hangar, we can now put this sub-assembly into our craft. I'll see you in a second. Back in the spaceplane hangar, we are now nearing completion of our first craft. So let's go to the sub-assemblies tab, get microsat 1 and attach it. Fantastic. All finished. Well, almost all finished. We now have just a few bits and pieces to complete. Let's close up the bay because we don't need to see into the bay. But we do need to make sure our fuel is correctly configured, because what we want to be able to do is ensure that all engines, that's the jets and the rocket, can obtain fuel from any of the cells that they are attached to, or literally not attached to in this case. So let's go over to the propulsion tab and find ourselves some fuel lines, and let's just set up the fuel lines. This is going to prove tricky. Like so. That allows fuel from that tank to flow to the jet engines, and this line will allow it to flow back the other way. So whichever engine needs fuel from whichever tank, access is available. So that sorts out our fuel. We've sorted out our payload. We now just need to sort out our action groups. And there's two sets of action groups I'm going to set out. The first is one that just does these utility electrical bits and pieces. And the second set is going to control the jet and rocket engines and how they are all going to interact with each other. Now, in order to reduce the total amount of drag that this aircraft is going to suffer as it goes through the lower part of the atmosphere, we're going to close up unnecessary intakes, because closed intakes take less drag than open ones. So let's close all unnecessary intakes, and we'll put that on custom 6. So these jet engines will run off just these 2 intakes in the lower atmosphere, minimizing drag. Now I'm going to use custom 7 to toggle the jet engines, and custom 8 to toggle the liquid engine. So that is now our completed mini SSTO. So I'm going to save that and save the launch for the next episode. So I'd like to thank you for watching and hope to see you again soon. Take care. Bye bye.